Thank you for showing up.
Yeah. You've been working
Thank
with
you for
some bad
coming.
actors.
Thank you for showing up. Thank you for
Didn't even
showing up.
show up.
Okay. Can't wait to
Ready?
show
Are
up.
we ready to start, Mark? Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Thank you. My name is Rusty Citron, and I'm the president of the Actors Hall of Fame Foundation. We are a 501c3 nonprofit that focuses on dramatic arts education. It's my pleasure to moderate the panel here this afternoon. And I want to introduce to my left three people that I'm sure you are aware of and know, and if not, they will make sure by the end of the session today that you do know who they are. To my immediate left is Corbin Burnson. Next to Corbin is Thora Birch. And at the end of the table on my left is Gregory Harris. So what I'd like to do, we had a very interesting conversation downstairs that we're going to follow through, but what I'd like to do is I'm going to give you 5 minutes or 3 minutes of a little bit about what my focus is from the foundation standpoint, and then let each of our guests discuss what they're doing in terms of dramatic arts and dramatic arts projects and how they see the world changing, and that'll kind of take the focus for the next hour. And we want to make sure that we get questions from the audience, so we're just kind of play this by ear, as it were. But I want to give you some statistics in terms of dramatic arts and actors and what's coming down the pike. Today in this country, there are 74% of schools that do not have any kind of dramatic arts education curriculum, okay? That's 40 million kids who don't have the ability to understand what dramatic arts can teach them, whether or not they want to be actors or not. Every 26 seconds in this country, a student drops out of school. And we have solid research that proves that if we can get one of those kids into a dramatic arts program, whether it's a course or a play or something that exposes them to dramatic arts, 84% will stay in school and finish through their graduation. We know that Shakespeare, who is now celebrating his 450th birthday, if taught correctly to 5th and 6th graders, will not only improve their chances for graduation, but will make them better scientists, mathematicians, and engineers, because Shakespeare, being a complex language, teaches kids early how to react and respond. So we've got a number of programs we do. We do have 50 members of the Hall of Fame. We're based in Culver City, and they are from film, television, and theater, so we are non-discriminatory in terms of where the actors come from and what they do. And the purpose of what we want to be able to do is to restore dramatic arts education in schools. So that's about the Actors Hall of Fame. You're more than welcome to take a look at us online at actorshalloffame.org. That's my plug. And I'll now let Corbin tell you what he's been doing for the last 20 years.
Really? Wow. Nothing. I need a job. I've been working. I've been very blessed to be an actor who continues to work. I early on made a choice, and I believe it was a choice and not just a situation I was forced into, that I view acting as a vocation, as a job that I happen to love. And I never invested in the game, as it were, to, if I do this properly, then I should move up the ladder there and I'll move up there. And I always said, and it was really given to me by my mom, that I just love to work as an actor. And short of something being something that I'm morally against or a bad script, I'm happy to explore. I tell people I could do community theater, I could do a commercial, I could be here in front of you, I could do a great movie, I could do a TV series, a not so great TV series. It doesn't matter to me. Acting is acting. I love the job of acting. And so I have one of the strangest IMDb's that anybody can ever imagine, up to recently writing, directing, and producing Christian faith-based movies, which is an exploration of my journey right now. Adored by my Lord. She's got a thing up there. But you're with me then. That's my mini iPad. Okay, there we go. Oh, okay. Oh, you're taking a picture. I just saw adored by the Lord when I'm like talking about Christian film, I thought, oh, I am. Great. It's working. So
I thought it was a cue card.
Yeah,
I thought she was holding up a cue card.
So, it's sort of all over the place, and you look at the things they do, which certainly confuses my Christian fan base, that I'm on The League tomorrow night saying God damn this and that, they just can't get it. That's okay. I know who I am. I know where I am, and I know my place in my faith and my journey. So I've just been very blessed to sort of follow my heart and do the things that I want to do. Currently, like I said, making films that are really a part of my life in the last 5 or 6 years. I started with a bag of ashes of my dad's and really said, wow, what do you think, man? You're 55 years old. And I wrote a little film called Rust that I didn't know what it was, and went up into a small community of 1,100 people who basically funded the film. And we made a movie up in a little small town in Canada. And the next thing I know, Sony was calling up saying, we heard about your little project. Can we release your movie? And it's great to see another Christian filmmaker. I went, that's right, I'm a Christian filmmaker. And anyway, so 5 movies later, we just had a movie come out last week called Christian Mingle. And in theatrical, it was the first one theatrically. It was very short-lived. It was meant to be. And it comes out in January on DVD. But currently, what I'm really exploring, and this is really a weird one, is I turned 60 a couple of months ago, and I look at life sort of like a 3-act play. And I see this as the 3rd act. First act, you're building to the second act, you're building to the third act, you're building to the curtain, the end. What is the end? What is the summation? How do you tie all these acts together? And everywhere I go, people go, I love LA Law. I mean, LA Law, Major League, a couple of you might get, oh, The Dentist is cool, or I loved you on The Young and the Restless. But I really get LA Law. So I started thinking, like Elton John playing Caesar's Palace best hits, maybe it's time to do the best hits thing. And I've been redeveloping a show, 2 versions of it. One, which is very Arnie Becker-ish like guy in Beverly Hills who's a lawyer. And, I'm thinking 20 million people. I don't know, Greg, how many people watched our shows back in the big numbers, 18 million, 17 million?
It's often 20 to 25.
Right. So, how many of those people are still alive? How many still watch TV? And, can I bring 6 or 7 million people to sample a show? I don't care. We were talking earlier. I don't care where it is. I think Amazon's pretty cool. NBC's cool. And Corbin.tv is pretty cool if it has to be. And I've been working on that. So 2 versions. One, and everybody around me said, why don't you just make it LA Law and go to Fox? I said, because if they say no, then I'm kind of screwed on all the other ideas. But anyway, I'm currently writing the version that is Arnie Becker. I actually just started that draft this morning, taking the script and Arnie Becker making it. And it's called On the Rocks. If you ever see it, you heard it here first.
I started acting when I was 4.5. I started in commercials, and then I was lucky enough to land a series when I was 6 years old, and I was played the smart kid on some family comedy for NBC. And it didn't really hit me until I was around 9 or 10 what acting really was and why I really liked it. I think before that I just assumed to be on set because everyone was really friendly and it was like going to a party every day. But then, I was working with the director, Mary Agnes Donahue, on a film called Paradise with Don Johnson and Melanie Griffith and Elijah Woods. And she took us scene by scene and explained to us what it was like to think as the other person had thought. And that really opened my eyes to what the true world of acting is, which is to put yourself in the position of another and lend yourself completely to their emotional world. And ever since then, it's always been different. What I love about acting is that it always changes. Your not only your approach to it, but the circumstances involved always change. And you always have to be willing to grow and expand, and it leads you into other worlds. So it's living in a fantasy world with a pragmatic approach. And that's what I love about it the most. And it's also, led me down different paths to explore other creative outlets such as writing or painting or blogging or what have you. Not that blogging is an artistic endeavor, but it broadens your mind. And I think that, if you can be gifted with the ability to always be curious, then you have an interesting outlook and your life will be a little bit fulfilling. And so that's why I still like acting, no matter, what the ups and downs of it might be. And that's my perspective on that element of it.
It's a story and you're sticking with it. Hi. I came to Hollywood in 1971 and started working about 4 or 5 years later. I just studied for the first few years on the GI Bill and got to really fall in love with the craft. And that has always been my advice. I have a daughter now who's 25, who's an actress, and sort of in the early stage of her success. Hope there's more, but I've always been a stickler for just seek excellence, and all the other stuff that you might have been desiring will come. And that was my focus when I first got here, was just to learn the craft. I didn't know at the time I was going to fall in love with it. I absolutely love everything about being an actor. Both of these speakers have spoken a little bit about the benefits of being an actor. I mean, there's a lot of things that we see, you know, the detriments of being an actor, but there are a lot of benefits of learning how. It's sort of like taking a psychology class, an active hands-on psychology class that's endless. You learn introspection and you learn observation, and you learn to have the courage to really examine others and yourself and weigh your value and weigh your mistakes. And I mean, there's just something really sane about it to me. And I know that's not the image that most people have of Hollywood or actors, but to me, I like actors better than almost anyone, because they really are, they have the ability to be wide open and vulnerable, and they have the ability then to shut that off and be completely invulnerable when people are spewing rejection at them. And that's kind of a contradiction that I think you have to be a little special or crazy to be able to accommodate that. And I did not want any of my 4 kids to get into the business. My wife was an actress as well, and we succeeded with 3 of them. But the 4th one, I didn't let her start. I didn't support it at all. I raised them outside of Los Angeles. I didn't want them around the business, not because I hate the business, but I don't really love the business. But I love acting, having success, being successful as an actor was probably more challenging than most of the actors I've known who felt they failed, because there's so many things that are alluring and tempting and can lead you astray when you have success, or that can make you judge your value by your success as an actor. And when that fickle thing dips or ends, you suddenly think you have no worth at all. And that's certainly not the case and shouldn't be the case. So I wanted my daughters and son to all stay away from it. One of them is in it and doing really well with that. She fell in love with the craft like I did. She's studied with the Groundlings for years, and she's been with lots of different teachers, and whether she's working or not, like Corbin was saying, whether it's in an equity waiver show or being paid a really hefty dollar amount to do something, she loves what she's doing. And that's the same thing that I feel. And I've had to, as Corbin and I both have had to do, we've been here a long time in this town, and we've had to adapt and change with the business. And we're here at Digital Hollywood gathering. The technology has shifted so dramatically that there are days, there are weeks, months where I don't recognize the business anymore from the one that I entered 40 years ago. But I still love it, because the bottom line is still that it's about good storytelling. Sometimes I think the biggest flaw that I see in our business today is that the story is overwhelmed by the technology. I think that's a common sidetrack that happens when people are making film today or television, where it's style over substance. So it's tempting to let all this technology and the ease of use of all this technology be the focus of your efforts. But I find as an actor and as a filmmaker, I've produced a lot of movies for the years, that the story is what sells. That if you can relate to it as a human being, I don't care if it's Gravity, the film Gravity, that is entirely special effects, surrounding, framing little faces that are telling a story. It's like I found in acting schools, where you have 2 people standing at a You're sitting at a table in a couple of chairs and there's no props, no lights, nothing. That can be the most compelling piece of storytelling ever. So to me, those kind of artistic challenges push through all the changes. And that love of that is what has, I think, helped enable me to survive through all these different decades. I was telling Corbin once that sometimes we'll go up for the same kind of roles because
Sometimes we're in the same room all the time.
There are about 10 of us that were all on the cover of TV Guide in 1980 in our various #1 hit shows. There were 40 or 50 of us. Now there's about 10 that are still in the business that haven't either gotten so angry and cynical or died or whatever that we show up in these rooms and it's like a meeting of old friends. And I don't know how they feel about me, but I'm just thrilled that we're still there. I don't really care who gets the part, as long as all those faces continue to show up.
They all have hair too, except for me. It's disturbing. I think it sets me apart, but it really just makes me bald.
So let's just explore that, because we were talking downstairs about not the technology part of this, but the story part of it, and actors kind of migrating from performing to creating, holding their own destiny. And then you heard from both Corbin and Gregory and Thor to a certain degree that being in charge of what they do in terms of telling the story and developing the story is now a much more critical part of the acting business, you know. And if you disagree, please let me know. But I think that actors are now more anxious in a lot of cases to take control of what the material they have is by creating it and managing it themselves, than in the old days when you would go up and hope that, you know, the material was good enough to be able to do that, because there's so much difference. I mean, you were talking, so just address that area in terms of taking control of your career.
Well, that's just me now. I mean, I think as an actor, if you're hired for a series, you know, I actually adopted early on a little bit of it. I don't mean it quite like this. I don't mean to be so cut and dry, but the way history seems to me is that I got a job, I went there, and I've been very fortunate to have wonderful words. Stephen Bochco, great, wonderful words to say, so you don't really have to mess around too much. But I guess it goes back to theater a little bit, where I studied and got my degrees and training in theater, that, you know, the playwright, you don't change anything. You don't change a word, you know. And I know as a writer, I slave over the I mean, I slave over those things to try to create rhythms of speech and patterns. And so I, as an actor, always thought, you know, unless there's something totally that's incongruous to the direction that I'm going, I try to find my way to slip into those things, because I think the other thing sometimes actors do just to become comfortable doing their own thing. And I find the more I try to fit into their thing. But that said, you know, and so that's how I handled the paying jobs, if you will. But as you get older, and some kids are doing it younger, I think what really happened to me is I sort of feel like I worked for the system for 35, 40 years. I've been very blessed. Thank you, God, for everything that's happened. But there's a certain point where you go, that's my dad's bag of ashes. What do I think about this world? And that's become more important to me. So I think the words now, you know, even doing a redo of LA Law, which would be the hardest one, because it's, no, we own that character, but it's my idea, but we own that, you know, that's going to be a difficult thing. But
I think in the climate now, no matter how you approach the creative element, if you're a writer, director, producer, or an actor, it's much more of a feeding frenzy now. It seems like more and more you have to be able to take on all categories, or at least understand what everyone does on the set. You know, I mean, from the days of when, like, you were contracted and the studio would pick you up from your house and then take you to your hairdresser and take photos of you there, and then, you know, see you poolside at lunch. From those days to when it broke up to where every actor was out for themselves, to now, it's even a little bit more cutthroat in the sense that everybody has to be willing to understand or participate in every other faction. I mean, if you look at Lena Dunham and people will say like, oh, wow, she's so successful. I say, wow, she must be really stressed out. She has to take on all of those parts. Everybody has to do everything now. I mean, I hope she's getting separate checks, you know,
She is.
it's just, well, yeah, but I mean, what, did she have to negotiate that deal too? I mean, it's like, where does it end? But I think the thing is that, in the creative world, it's nice to just approach it from one point of view, but I think we're in a world now where we can. And I think that there is less and less distinction between like, well, who's really an artist and who's really not, because you have to be able to do everything and you have to respect others that are working as equally as hard. I mean, it's just all across the board within the arts and without. So it's a tough spot, but at the same time, it's an exciting era, because instead of like, oh, well, you're a writer, that's what you do, you write. Now it's like, oh, you're a writer, what else can you do? And so you at least have that opportunity to express yourself in different ways. So it's kind of a double-edged sword where you have to work harder, but at least you're presented with more opportunities. And I think that makes it exciting for actors as well as other creatives.
So back in the day when we were all much younger, the process, and this is an aspect of technology that I don't think most people recognize, but Gregory and I were talking about it earlier, that the process of doing a production is gone from 40 miles an hour to 120 miles an hour. And what used to take a week now takes an hour, okay? The concept of dailies, film dailies, are irrelevant, okay? And you can shoot a scene at 9 o'clock, and by 10:30, an executive in a studio or an office 400 miles away is critiquing what you just did. So there's stress on an actor from a process standpoint, but at the end of the day, it's still that actor's ability to bring that character to life on screen. How do you react professionally to that stress level that Thora was talking about, of taking 10 minutes to do something that used to take a day?
I don't see it as increased stress. I see it as in most cases as a decrease in the stress, because just to use today as an example, this morning I spent 2 hours in an ADR session, automated dialogue replacement. We used to call it looping when I started. When I started 40 years ago, we would loop at Universal. If you did anything at Universal on television there, you loop to sound. They would play like a little recording of the line, and then you would say it into a microphone.
Beep.
No beeps.
No?
Nothing. They would say the line and you'd repeat it and try to get the same tempo, but you couldn't even see it. They didn't have a screen or anything to show you that, yeah, that's pretty close, that ought to work. You just had to trust that, yeah, it sounded right. It sounded like with the original time you did it, so we'll go with that. Then they went to the beep, beep, beep. Then they went to these 3 lines crossing the screen. And on the third one, you'd go. And it would take hours and hours and hours to do a scene, to do a 15, 20 line scene. It'd take you hours. And they'd have to go get new reels and put the reels up and then back everything up in slow-mo and then go forward again. And today I did probably what would have taken 3 days of looping. I did it in 2 hours, ADR. I'd say the line and I'd say, let's do that again. Yep. Do it again. Yep. Okay, and we're doing it again. And until it was perfect. And I'm looking at the screen and it's, and you wouldn't know that that's just one, it made it so simple. So the time could be spent, not that it is, but it could be spent on making a better product by focusing on the storytelling and the relatable parts of the project that the audience really tunes into, rather than just the technology of perfectly lip syncing lines. It only took 2 hours to do that. Much cheaper, half as many guys employed to help me. And that frees up some money and time for other things that can make it a lot better. So in some ways, the technology has really been helpful. In other ways, it does also, as I was saying earlier, sometimes you fall in love with the technology at the expense of the storytelling.
Well, I'm not sure it goes to exactly what you're saying, but part of what I've noticed is, and I mean this sincerely, I've always tried to come with game. It doesn't matter what project it is. I work on the script the night before. I really try. I've made it it's what we said earlier. I enjoy the craft. So doing the detective work is actually half the fun to me. But you got to come with game, because you're right. I mean, things that used to a scene that could take 3 and 4 hours, you get like 2 shots, and it's kind of like a soap opera. Soap operas are the worst. My mom did one, and I did it occasionally. And you, as long as you hit your mark and come within close with the words, forget the intent. You're done. That's it. That's it. Yes, you're a priest. You're saying they're married. They look happy. They kiss. We got it. You know? But you really got to come with game, because you know, I mean, LA Law used to be 8 days. Some of these shows are 6 days. You know, and so I don't know if it's the technology that's done that, but certainly the money, and then there's another part too that's just weird. But you can't seem to have as much fun as you used to. There's just no space for doing the take that's like, watch this, I'm going to make everybody laugh. I don't even think you see blooper reels anymore on shows, because there's just nothing funny. You know, there's no, you know, all you hear at the end of a script is "fuck you, get it right." You know, the directors get all pissed off. There's no more, "Oh, that was great, let's do another one." You know, or God forbid you start like busting up with each other. It's like, I've seen directors go ballistic over that now, where it's used to, you know, hold the setup for an hour. But you got to be on the game.
So one of the other aspects that we want to talk about, so I'm going to stop for a minute. Does anybody have any questions about what we've covered so far? Because I don't want to save all the, I do these, you know, a lot, and the audience, it's like, oh, you got to wait till the very end to ask a question. So we've got a lot of stuff. Does anybody have any questions for any of the panel on what we've talked about so far? You're all in agreement.
Fascinating.
Okay, good.
Don't be shy.
Oh,
That's always what it is. I dare somebody to be first.
well, I will tell you that from my perspective, working with kids, you all had started as actors. All of you started as actors, because the first thing you ever learned to do was pretend as a kid. Okay, and actors spend a lot of time going back to that root. But everybody in this room came into this world, and the first thing you actually learned was how to pretend. The second thing you learned to do was deny that you did it, okay? Both required an enormous amount of acting, okay? But, so if there are no more questions, the next area that I wanted to focus on is the audience, and Corbin had made this mention, is that today, the home and the theater are one and the same. That everybody has a screen that's 2 inches too big, and you know they're very inexpensive, and you can create all kinds of environments. And back in the 70s and 80s, when there was just a 3-network universe, if you didn't do 30 million or 15 million in daytime, the Hollywood Squares used to do 8 or 9 million in daytime, you were canceled, right? But you were canceled after 16 weeks, or you know that was a usual pickup. So how, from an actor's perspective, do you feel that this home theater environment, which is a result of technology?
I love that you keep saying the name of my company.
I think it's the same dynamic. How many people have you talked to that will say like, oh man, when I was a kid, I just lived in the theater. You know, on a weekend, it might have cost like $1.25, but I would see 3 shows, and I spent my entire Sunday in the theater, and that was their home. They spent the entire week at school or at home or out in the streets looking forward to go see the new Lash LaRue movie. And it's always been that entertainment has been an escapist quality, but it's been an essential thing, especially in the American culture since like the mid 30s, ever since the Great Depression. And I think that the ability of people to now have that in their homes, it's just an extension of that. I think that the theater has always been a home. I mean, vaudeville was a home for a lot of people. And it's just always been looking forward to that moment when they can relax and escape into a story. So I don't really think that the medium or the media affects the experience. I just think it's really about the audience giving itself into the story, and either you're going to be an effective storyteller or not. And in fact, honestly, the fact that maybe now you're reaching a kid on a subway who maybe, 20 years ago in the 80s or 30 years ago in the 80s didn't have any means, like didn't have cable, didn't have any of it. Now they've got an iPod or an iPhone, and they can just like watch a TV show or whatever at their own leisure. So I think that the accessibility is actually a benefit, and it's created more of a want for content. And even if we think it or not, the fact is that there's more people doing more now than ever before. It used to be just the studios. Now it's like a kid in his garage who's got like a YouTube channel that, 500,000 people happen to watch every week.
I agree with that on one hand, but on the other, like everything else, it's a double-edged sword. And what has been lost in this process of bringing theater to the home and to the phone and to the computer screen is the social act of gathering together to witness something that you can still get in the theater. People go to Broadway, and part of the joy of the experience is that you're in a group of people watching a show. And it used to be that in the movie theaters as well. I mean, I grew up watching movies, and part of what I loved about it was not what was in front of me, but what was behind me. And that all those people breathing and laughing and sobbing and farting or whatever they were in the theaters, was part of the great experience of seeing movies. Now, yes, you can see a movie in probably better quality than you ever could back then in your own living room, but it might just be you by yourself or a few people together, and that's still got some value, and it doesn't make the movie any less important, but the experience as a whole, I think, is compromised a little bit by that. For me,
potentially, but it's not an argument. It's just an addition to what you're saying, because I understand what you're saying and I agree with it wholeheartedly. But at the same time, let's say, it's Sunday night and I'm going to crash out early. I'm going to go to sleep at like 8 o'clock. But it just so happens that my favorite show, The Good Wife, comes on at, 9 o'clock. So I get up the next morning, and the first thing I do is I go on my computer and I'm like, oh, what was the last episode of Good Wife? So I watch it. And then at the end of the episode, I guarantee you there's a little tag that says Twitter, Facebook, and immediately it's like inviting me. Not that I'm on those things. I'm personally not. But it invites you to participate in the show, talk about it, critique it, and actually companies are now starting to do market research on those results alone.
Oh, yeah.
To use like, okay, well, the audience really likes this character. Like, what are we going to do with that? And so it's a kind of odd dynamic where the audience is maybe more physically removed from the end result, but at the same time, their input is more impactful than ever on the potential future content that's driven.
Absolutely. And I'm certainly no one to judge the ability of younger generations to multitask. I've got 4 kids that all grew up, looking at their phones and eating their dinner and saying, "What do you mean? I'm talking with you, Dad. What are you talking?" And this was our dinner conversation. I never saw eyes, but they felt like they were conversing with me. Every television show they watch, they're also doing. I just got my series canceled called Reckless like 10 days ago. And all summer long, we were live tweeting while episodes aired, both on the East Coast and the West Coast. The entire cast would gather and we would live tweet with people viewing the show on the East Coast. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, I worked so hard to make that a really good scene. And I know somebody on the East Coast is typing to somebody while I'm talking in the scene. And I felt like, how can they possibly enjoy the experience that I hoped for them when I was acting that piece? But people assure me they do enjoy it. It's just their way of interpreting something, and it's different than my way. I didn't grow up double tracking. Yes.
Okay. I'm Mike Schneider, but I go by Schneider Mike. I'm a content and tech guy. One question I have is, if you're going to do a new spin or a new take on something that's a classic, and a lot of time has elapsed the way that you did things before and the way that you do things now. Star Wars, perfect example. Corbin, what do you think are the secrets to getting it right, and to doing it in a way that preserves the original but also respects the new ways?
Because that's actually something I'm facing with this project that I'm trying to write. I'm somewhat returning to the roots of the root of how we did LA Law to write this. Now, as I read the script, it's vastly different from, How to Get Away with Murder, or some new show. Or even a CSI. I'm doing something that's even more old fashioned than Boston Legal. Because if you really look at LA Laws, they're great and they're wonderful. They stand up. They look like 80s shows. So I'm debating, I'm curious. I don't know. The answer is I'm not exactly sure. I think it's, well, I called the episode "To Kill a Tweeting Bird." So maybe it's the content, maybe it's the actual, the content of what you're doing, but style, I think you want to return to something of the style, something familiar. I think that's the whole purpose of it is it's got to feel a bit familiar, but new clothes, new, you got to dress it currently. And I think you got to be relevant in subject matter. I mean, Arnie Becker used to hate going into his courtrooms. I never went into a courtroom. I settled in the hallway because I had a picture of a guy in a compromising position that was going to be made public in a courtroom. And I tell these kids in this series idea that I say, this is how it's done. The kid goes, no, it isn't. It's done right here. One tweet and we're done. I don't even go to the courthouse. So I think it's the same thing, but it's just, new shoes. I mean, that's at least the approach I'm taking.
Just as an audience member alone and as a participant in the content, for me, I at this point I've reached that place where I'm like, you know how to respect something that was great in its original form, leave it alone. What happened to original content? I'm just saying, like, I'm so tired of franchises and all that. I'm not saying that they can't be redone in explosive new ways. Of course they can, but I'm really done with it. It's been 15 years now that we've been doing X-Men, Superman twice, or Spider-Man twice. It's like, it's gotten to a point where, like, please, where is like the realm of the 70s where we had like people either converting plays or original books, or we're doing the book thing, but original content, where is it? I'd really like to get back to that, just because like there's a lot of new talent out there and they're all like really struggling right now. And there's a lot of people with new, fresh, modern perspectives on stories that should be brought into the real realm. And I'm like, I don't want to see, some more armor on somebody. Like, okay, I mean, if I want to see armor, I'll read a history book. I got it,
Can I go back to one thing real quickly about the community? Because I was going to say community before you did, watching shows. The thing that's really interesting is writing for one person watching this, because writing typically, and I'm an old-fashioned guy, goes back to theater, where you said I love you. You do, things are bigger than life. You things are just slightly elevated. They're theatrical. Then we toned them down, and all the guys in the 70s with their cool films toned it down. But still, there's something hyper real about it. And I'm finding that when you write for an audience of one, the construction of a joke isn't the same. It's not the same, because that laughter is, it depends on the community kind of getting it, and one little chuckle there starts the next joke, and then you watch how a laugh happens in a theater. It's not everybody at once. It's and it grows and it builds. So when you're writing something and thinking, these people have to watch this, and I'll give you a perfect example. A great show I just did, The League. I think it's very funny. It was fun inventing there. But I think those shows, I was saying fart jokes and fuck jokes and all sorts of stuff on The League, because it kind of like, I'm just, hey dude, check this out. Fuck. It's like, you can, the construction of a joke doesn't have to be as much. You're like more talking to a person and not the community. So, and even in drama, the whole build and the idea of a guy being like, oh God, I'm going to cry, my girlfriend, and this guy's going to see me. That's gone. It's like, if you're going to make a dude cry watching this, you got to work for it, man. You really got to work for it. And that is one of the unfortunate things about seeing something in community. I think the construct of jokes, drama, conflict, and story itself are a different task, which is, and that becomes weird because you don't know where somebody's going to watch. I'm a big advocate for watching stuff together, though I do, get up at 3 a.m. and watch Shark Tank. So
one of the things, Thor, in terms of your point, one of the things that I've noticed, and I can speak of this with some historical perspective, we were the company that first bought Marvel back in 1988. Okay, for $34 million. It was the price for Marvel. Okay, they were making more money selling comic books about Vietnam than Spider-Man. Okay, we couldn't sell a 30-minute, half-hour X-Men series because the technology wasn't there to produce it. Okay, and 25 years later, because technology was there, that $38 million company was sold for $4 billion. Okay, so part of the answer to the question is that the economics for original content aren't what they used to be. Okay, and that's always going to be an issue. The second issue that we talked about is that the decision makers that used to run Hollywood and the content factory are no longer here, they're on Wall Street. And so the decisions about why content is made or isn't made becomes a function of return on investment. And it really started to hit when the DVD sales went off the deep end, because a studio would make whatever they thought they could make, knowing that they'd have DVD to protect themselves. And now they don't have that, and the decision to make a movie, in my opinion, is more a function of how well or how it's going to affect the stock price of a company rather than how it may do in a theater, okay? And I agree with you 100%.
But what doesn't, how well it will do in a theater, or the the projections of that determine the stock?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay,
Yes.
so you're still talking about a factor of talent, committed, and the potential audience perception of that. I mean, let's take the Batman Ben Affleck thing for an example. I mean, I didn't follow the stock, but I'm sure that there were fluctuations that day because the potential audience reaction
There
was
are
like up and down, up
fluctuation-
and down.
Right,
So I
exactly.
mean, but that's not a real way to make a business decision.
But
and-
if you're a company like Disney and you have shareholders, that absolutely is, because you can make a movie like Lone Ranger and you have to take a write-off of $190 million, which affects the stock price. And so I'm explaining, I mean, and the challenge is, I mean, I was representing an actor who had a major movie and he screened it for the studio executives and nobody laughed. He had a screening room, there were 4 people, nobody laughed. He knew he had a funny movie. He said, I'm going to go outside and I'm going to get real people to watch this movie. Pack the theater, okay? And that's how Blazing Saddles got released, because the studio didn't think it was funny, okay? And when Mel would turn around and screen movies for critics, he had one rule only. You can't screen it in an empty room with just one person. He would only let critics go in to review the movie if it was in a screening room, a house where there were other people, because in that environment, laughter is contagious, okay? And what you're talking about, or what you're talking about in terms of content, is how we combat these suitable distractions to a certain degree so that the actors still have the ability to push through all of that. And there are more challenges today because there's more distraction.
Well, that's exactly why they had laugh tracks on sitcoms, is to encourage and inform the audience as to
Thank
when.
you, because you can
Right.
create audience interest, and that's what it all comes down to at the end of the day too. But at the same time, if you're gonna take a franchise and you're gonna say like, oh well, there's a built-in audience here, well then you have to stick to some kind of formula that supposed built-in audience respects and responds to. And so at the end of the day, it's like the audience being the cart that pushes the horse forward. And I think it's a weird area to live in now, and I don't think that the audience actually necessarily likes being in that driver's seat, because if you talk to anyone on the street or on a blog, they'll all be like, man, I'm so tired of all this nonsense that's coming out. I really wish that there was like, where's the next Quentin Tarantino? Where's the next this? Where's like the next Pulp Fiction? Everyone's actually really bored of having certifiable hits crammed down their throat.
Right.
And so it's like, let's let the new talent out there, let's let them in, because it's not that they're not there, they are there. It's
See,
just
I'm
that
not
we're
so
telling
sure.
them that they won't work, and so they're going away saying like, oh, maybe I need to become an investment banker for the rest of my life.
My problem is that I'm not really sure they are there. I mean, that's what concerns me. I have 4 sons, 25, twins are 22 and 16. And I'm going to name drop for a moment just because it was so goddamn interesting. I was at a dinner party with Warren Beatty this weekend, and 6 people sitting around a table. The most fascinating man you could possibly imagine, because he tells every story that exists. But he says, at one point, he says, so if you could have one, maybe this is an old man thing, but like, if you could have one thing, what would it be? Just one thing in this world. Everybody went around, my wife and other people. And he said, be interested. And I don't think kids are interested in life. I think they're turned off to life. I think they've been anesthetized. They've been, I just don't think they invest in. I mean, the Patty Chayefskys would blow their brains out over searching life. Being interested in exploring and studying. I think kids today are just, And I think that's part of the problem why we don't get new content. I mean, a younger, and I'm talking probably 25 or 30 years old. I just don't see being truly interested, deeply interested in the plight of mankind and humanity. I just don't see a lot of it. I think, unfortunately, they've been turned off to it by the world, you know.
Well, that might be the job of the filmmaker. Then that's a good goal, is to get them interested.
Get them in, absolutely, to get them interested. I mean, you know, it goes back to your thing. I want to go, I'm with you, man. I want to go into schools and turn kids on to it. And there's nothing like the arts, to round this conversation back.
Right.
There is nothing like the arts to turn a kid on.
Right.
There's nothing like the arts. There's nothing yet. And there it is in school too. We take it away. What do we get rid of first? We get rid of the grass playing field. We get rid of the musical equipment. We get rid of the theater arts.
Right.
And, you know, and we turn out a bunch of zombie dummies.
But never football.
I think she is.
Right. Well, no, what I've said consistently is that it is as important to teach a kid about dramatic arts as it is to teach him how to hit a ball. Okay. And the reality is that there are more opportunities for actors in school to become productive actors than there are for kids who play baseball in Little League to become Major League Baseball players. So there's opportunities out there. And I think that it's should be focused on how you make that work. Yes, ma'am.
But you have to understand the kids, and I have a 16-year-old and 23-year-old boys, that they're not so much them, but when the kids, their idols are reality shows, their idols are Kim Kardashian and all the Kardashian nonsense that's going on, and all the things that are happening, the videos on YouTube that are, one brother punking another brother or all this. So this is what's going on. And then you're asking for great writers that were on Taxi and Cheers.
Right.
That whole era is gone. I don't know if we can swing it back, the pendulum back. I mean, sometimes we do. And a great show, Breaking Bad or something will come through. But it must be a tour de force going on with all these crazy celebrity I don't know if I would go so far as say no talent, but I can't think of a whole lot of things that the Kardashians, I haven't seen them in a Broadway show or doing Shakespeare or doing.
And I don't think you will.
But see, but
the highest grossing and the most watched, and if you had Kardashians here on the panel, it would be crazy. Why?
well, but I think you have to look and say which is the cart and which is the horse. This is an endless argument. Which is the cart? Which is the horse? Is the medium, is the media, is Hollywood or theater people supposed to lead the pack, or is the pack leading the media and leading Hollywood? You know, what they demand is what these people mostly make. So there are a few people in the film business, and there always only have been a few at any given time, who actually take the responsibility and are willing to fight the fight to lead the public into a particular direction. What I think has led them to this place where the Kardashians are the biggest stars in America is the business side of the business.
Exactly.
Well, I think there's.
My niece that's going to London, and she's going to come back and compete with the Kardashians. I mean, she's studying a craft, and like your daughter is, and then they're up against that kind of thing.
I have a much different view. I'm sorry.
I just want to say one thing. I think that there's still a propensity to view, consumerism and viewership as a positive. Okay, but I can give you an example of let's take one article online and let's say it's got 1,200 comments on it. I guarantee you that 1,000 out of those comments, specifically on a celebrity figure like Snooki or the Kardashians or whatever, will be negative. Okay, so we still look at that as success. It's not success because you've got 1,000 people calling them stupid and ignorant and like, why are they here? And this is not news and we don't want to read about this. Granted, why are they taking the time to write those things? But it's still an expression of their frustration that they're even being presented with it. And I think that the old adage that there's no such thing as bad publicity is really not true, because when you look at the backlash of like the Kanye West, Kim Kardashian, Anna Wintour cover for Vogue or whatever magazine she does, I don't even know, but it was so negative that became the news story. It's like, why is these actually the most popular and yet the most hated people in some way in America? And I think that as a society, we're still struggling with a lot of those issues. Like, why are we fascinated to the point of like are so upset with ourselves for even clicking on the news article? And I think that that's like a dynamic that's really changing. And I think that it won't always be that way, because criticism has become more of a dominant thing. We used to be a nice, polite society in the 50s, like, oh my gosh, don't say that, don't do this, be polite. And now it's like, no, I'm going to go online. I'm going to tell you what I think right now. And that really is changing a lot of how we perceive success to be. And I think that a lot of people, if they say like, oh, well, from a business point of view, yeah, the Kardashians are doing great, but for how long? It's not going to be sustainable. Nobody wants to hear from Kanye West anymore. I mean, they just don't.
And part of it,
but in the same sense that most of the big budget movies these days are released hoping to make all their money in the first 10 days before the bad word of mouth gets out there. I don't think sustainable is what anybody's really looking for anymore. It's
right.
The quick kill.
And part of it, there's a dichotomy going on here. Broadway has never been more successful than it has in the last 5 years. More people are coming out to Broadway shows and seeing Broadway shows, and not the Spider-Man theater shows, but true theater. The current #1 show on Broadway is with Nathan Lane and Matthew Broderick, and it's about a play. Right? That's what it is. Okay. You look at the amount of people, and then on the negative side of that, theater attendance in the United States, people who go to movie theaters, the occupancy level of theaters is 13%. Okay. Now you can't run a successful business with 13% occupancy. Okay. So you have this conflicting view, and a lot of that is that there's this monster out there called the media, which is consuming things, okay? So it gets on television because it looks interesting. What the Kardashians have done, they've made, in today's era, good television. Now, we can all disagree on the definition of good television, but all you have to do in terms of figuring out how to get on the news is you can't put a story on local news unless you've got a picture to go with it. In terms of network television, you can't put a network show on unless you have a good story. And at the end of the day, it's the story that makes it last, because the Kardashians aren't a story. They're just today's news. Yes, ma'am.
I'm just wondering if I could ask you, the title of this is A Strategic Consideration, Film and TV as a Weapon of the Mind. I'm not certain what that really means to you, but why I came here is, and I wanted to hear something about how our medium, for those of us who are actors, writers, performers, can actually mean something. So a weapon for change, a weapon for good, a weapon for creativity. Could each of you just maybe share, we can argue and say all these negative things about the state of everything until the cows come home, because we all know it's true. But if we don't say what we want and make that intention, what's the point? So I thought that's what the title of this meant. And I'm just wondering, is there any positive spin that we can think about to share with each other about how we can make this?
No, it all sucks. We're all fucked and doomed. No, there is. Here we are, and this whole thing started with, my version of it is cave drawings, where people told stories about people. And that's all we're doing. That's all the Kardashians are. It's just stories about people of a world that we're in. So the good news is, yes, we are weapons of the mind. We are a tool, might be a better word, to tell stories about who we are. And if you want something positive, not to go into my spiritual beliefs at this point, but I sat with the Dalai Lama. No. I was watching the Today Show, and the Dalai Lama was on it, and Matt Lauer said, wow, the world is all messed up. It's just terrible. And he goes, no, Matt, it is exactly as it should be. And I changed my view. I thought, sometimes you have to step back from 1950, 2014. You have to really go all the way back to, hieroglyphics, storytelling on a wall, where we're going. There is a beauty that I've learned and come to embrace, and that is whether you put it with God or nature, whatever it is, when there are too many trees in the forest, lightning will hit a tree and half the forest will burn down and it will clear out. I actually believe, in this odd way, and I don't want to get too religious, so I have to be careful, we have this ability to do whatever the fuck we want. We are unbridled. Whether you have morals or whatever, you can do whatever you want. You might get arrested for it. You might be awarded for it. You can want to do. Right now, we're little children as humanity, just getting up and tossing shit over left and right. But I will tell you this, at some point, you do get up and walk. And you do, and those who don't will fall and hurt themselves and stay down. I actually believe, people argue about the environment and all that. I think, man, we're more organic, we're more conscious of environment than we ever were, certainly when I grew up, So I think, oddly enough, the good news is, there'll always be the paintings on the wall. We might just be stuck in this shitty period of the Kardashians. But I will tell you, it will clear up. Half the forest will burn down, and we will go back to being human again, because that's all we know how to do, is tell stories. And I believe what we just have to do in our best way, with whatever guidance, whether it's nature, God, whatever it is, just be true to the heart. And that's the only thing I teach my kids. No, they're not interested. I just try to teach them to be true to the heart, to reflect what they see, to tell the story. And I think the story, you may not like it if it's in the Kardashians framework, story is alive. Our ability, our desire to keep telling the story is there. So I think it's positive. I mean, I'll go side with the Dalai Lama on that one.
And I think we also have the power to change the channel.
You have the power to
Well,
do
I think
whatever you
there's-
want.
Yeah, I mean, back to her original question, I think there's 3 tiers to the answer, which is like, number 1, if you get hired, that's awesome. Number 2 is that, all stories are in one form or another, whether we agree with it or not, a reflection of either what society is or what someone thinks society is. We're part of a human story in one way or another. The third is that despite those 2 things, you still have a choice, and there's still, hopefully, at some point in your career, an opportunity to guide where you want to go, to tell the stories that you want to tell, and be the characters that you want to be. And I think that maybe that's the ultimate goal, because it is still, whether we realize it or not, it's a teacher's medium. If you're a kid and you're watching something, that it becomes absorbed into your psyche, and that's, it forms how you interpret the world. So with that knowledge, if you're lucky, hopefully you'll be able to guide who you want to be and who you want to portray and the stories that you want to tell within that realm, because you can't extricate the fact that your performance is going to have an impact on an audience one way or the other. And I think that a lot of people, maybe look towards the business end of it, and they're like, well, that will at least help me personally. But I think at the end of the day, it's still like, you're going to have that attachment, that responsibility attached to you. And I think if you can find a way to navigate that and even control it, then that's success more than anything else.
I think it's a really good question. I'm glad that you asked why, about the title of this panel, and for something positive to come out of it. I think the situation on a grand scale is that technology has armed the entire world with the ability to both create storytelling and watch storytelling. Everybody, everywhere. Technology is why the Arab Spring occurred. Technology is, yesterday on Facebook, I watched one right after the other. I watched several ISIS soldiers shoot down about 50 people in a row. And then I went to the next and clicked on the next thing, and I watched and learned that a Bengal tiger, a duck, and a goat can all get along. Those are 2 different stories. And both of them come from these obscure little places because people were armed with cameras and the ability to send their stories out, to make storytelling and send it out. And I think it will be abused and it will be used benevolently, and as it always has. But now everybody is within reach, and everybody is within reach of the ability to tell a story. So I think that's what's really changed more than anything.
Yes, ma'am.
Steve, can we go back to what you said in the beginning? You said that something like 80%, a higher percentage of kids graduate if we have to do theater.
Yes, 84%.
Okay, I was looking at that and thinking, when it said the weapon of the mind, I mean, couldn't we work in some way, if we want to go to using it as a weapon of the mind to, like, teens encouraging excellent national media? I mean, get kids involved in media. I mean, we're all.
Well, that's exactly.
Actually, and television film itself as a vehicle could be that kind of weapon of the mind for the children.
In a positive way, absolutely.
In a positive way, that's
Right.
what I was thinking. So, because I was thinking about the title also. I was looking, where is it? I don't know, because I'm interested in everything. Because I have. But, but that was just something that I was thinking, do you ever look at any of the vehicles that you've done in the past, any of you as actors, as things that you felt like negatively impacted others? You know,
Oh, I mean,
movies or
there are no doubt projects that I worked on, films that I worked on, television shows that had an effect that I would prefer they didn't have. Okay, but it wasn't I wasn't the one in control to say make it or not make it. No. I wasn't taking responsibility for it. I'm just saying I've been involved in that kind of stuff. We all have choice. Okay. The reality in terms of the question of how we use it as a weapon is that I don't see it as a weapon. I don't see it as an aggressive position. I see it as an opportunity to tell a story by actors who are trained in how to tell a story. Okay. There's a difference between a storyteller, okay, which if you have a chance, you should go to Louisville because the National Storytellers Association is the most marvelous group of people in the world, but they're not actors, but they're great storytellers. And there's an art to telling a good story, as there is an art and a science to be able to act out a good story and assume that character. So I think that we're full of possibilities. I'm always, the glass is half empty. I mean, half full, it's not half empty. So I look at it from a standpoint of actors who I'm looking at the next generation, okay? I want to take what Corbin and everybody else here has done and build it so the kids coming up today have role models that are inspirational, that are positive weapons for them to change. Because if we don't do that, we're going to lose a generation of kids who don't have an education.
To answer your question about do you regret, when I was asked that question at dinner table and he said to be interested, my answer was on my last breath to have no regrets. And I realize I've done a billion things that I don't like, but ultimately it's what I do now. What I do that's my new word is true. What I do that's true to what I know and believe right now. And you know, if you can't erase one little part of that caveman's drawing so the story changes. You can't. There's 1,000 things. I could be wealthier, but I wouldn't have one of my sons. There's a choice I could have made specifically, but I would not have one of my sons. So, you know, everything is a part of the story, and you move forward from it, and you hopefully well, that's a bad word because that's everybody's responsibility is different, but you accept it all and you move forward and you embrace it as part of your story. And if you become interested, which probably is more equally important with having no regrets, you do things that move the story forward. And for some of us, it's like you said, I was asked a question when I was in playwriting. What do we do? Do we hold up the mirror to society, or are we it and they? And do we create what they do? And I always believe that we hold up the mirror. So within that, let's do that and affect positive change.
Thank you. Corbin, Thora?
Yeah,
Gregory?
the
Thank
only
you.
thing I had,
No.
Thora
Oh.
had something to say.
no,
go ahead.
sorry, I was briefing up.
Sorry.
The only thing I was going to add to that is that, of course, some lessons, are negative, but they're lessons. And so you can make a film or a portray a character that is negative or might have a potential negative influence, but at the same time, you have to trust in the audience to interpret that as a negative. And, you know, all of life is not great. And of course, we want to take the responsibility and progress society in a certain kind of way, you know, provide a little bit more enlightenment and stuff like that. But in order to do that, you need to portray the negative too. And it really comes down to the audience and that communal interpretation of what the product is to form that opinion of what is negative and what can't be allowed. I mean, obviously everyone agreed that the two main characters in Natural Born Killers were atrocious. Nobody thought that they were great. And that's, you know, that's part of it. And so it's always a gamble with a character like, you know, a Gordon Gekko or the Wolf of Wall Street or whatever. You know, you're going to have like 20 kids out there and they're like, yeah, we want to do that. And everyone's going to be like, man, what's the matter with you? You know, 20 of their friends are going to be like, you are ridiculous. And they're going to be like, no, well, really, am I? And then that's how you at least start a dialogue. You start a conversation about like what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. So all those mirrors are still necessary, whether they
Absolutely.
reflect something good or negative.
They're the story.
Yeah.
Greg.
Yes.
I think that's very profound.
Come on, say something.
I got nothing more.
Say something deep, dude.
Nothing more to add.
Golfing at 7. No, I know.
Next question.
Last question. Yes.
Well, I was going to say that I think changed is just, you know, we only had 3 networks, and like you had to wait until Sunday to watch movies. It was special, and now at any moment I can just sit here. I can be watching a movie while it's just like you didn't have the access to it. So you know the craft and what you do and the importance of it was more because it was sport. This was harder to get. It's like if you didn't stay up late, you'd miss that show.
Mhm.
Like you'd miss out on something. And it was interesting recently when they did those live musicals, where they did The Sound of Music and the
Mhm.
viewership, and you're like, oh, it's interesting. Like that's something you had to tune in at that time to enjoy that experience. So that's the one in terms of the conversation about it.
And they repeated it the next day, but you just know people watching it the next day weren't as captivated by it as those watching it live. That idea that no, this is live. Every eye in America is watching this right now.
Christopher Walken's doing Peter Pan live. Do you see that?
No,
That's
is he gonna do it?
you gotta watch that.
Oh, good. Yeah, I'll watch that.
Yeah, so that's just the fun, I think, of like bringing back that.
Mhm.
So you can create whatever.
Mhm.
So how many people in this, to answer your question, in terms of, in closing this up, by a show of hands, how many people in this room have seen Gone with the Wind or Wizard of Oz in a theater? In a theater. That's great, because most people have never seen those kinds of works in theaters. They watch them on television. No, that doesn't count.
Can we include It's a Mad, 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 Mad World?
Yes. Thank you all. Thank you all very much. Gregory, Cora, Corbin, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone, for coming.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, man. Thank you. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, man. No, I'm not producing. No, I'm an actor who is on Scorpion that shoots in LA. Yeah. Oh, okay. Okay. Getting where? Oh, cool. Oh, great. Yeah, absolutely. That was fun. Hey, man.
Brian Sweeney.
Hey, Ryan. Good, man.
I would say that I read a scientific article the other day saying that people who go to theater, they learn empathy more so than being in the theater watching a movie. So
Right.
people also like to go to the theater because they learn empathy from
Right.
the people around them.
Right.
Just seeing someone on stage, they learn empathy.
Sure.
I just want to ask you a quick question that probably won't yield a very short answer. But I'm a theater actor in Santa Barbara. Just really, I come from the technology side, but I have a burning desire to be more creative. So I started doing theater about 2 years ago. Do you have any advice for aspiring actors 25?
You know, these days, I'll tell you what it is. I think because of, to round it back to this conversation, create a short little something that shows what you do. Not a reel, like, oh, here's a little bit of me in this bullshit commercial. No. Create a 10-minute piece that